God of War is one of the most well-known and loved IPs from the previous generation of consoles, and despite playing God of War 3 again recently before this new iteration released, I couldn't quite build up the hype in my head like everybody else has. It was incredibly encouraging, however, to see that many critics received review copies over a week early, and that shows these companies have faith in their product and they're not trying to hide anything. And it seems as though the critics are all in agreement that this game is one of the best to release this year, as well as one of the best of the franchise altogether. So I felt that picking up this game at release was probably a safe bet, and I'm really glad that I did. So let's get on with the review. As always, if you enjoy this video, you can like, share and subscribe, and that would be awesome. So God of War 2018, or God of War 4, is an exclusive title for the PlayStation 4 that continues the story of Kratos. But I struggle to label this game as a sequel or a reboot of the franchise, but I would say that it does a great job of doing both simultaneously, whichever way that you look at it, whichever way that you want it. The biggest difference though is apparent immediately with this new game being an over-the-shoulder third-person hack-and-slash story-based adventure, rather than more zoomed-out action-oriented view of previous titles. Kratos is a different character this time. He's living in the wild with his son and he spends his time exploring the wilderness and training his next of kin. He still retains his godlike strength, but his attitude towards things have changed. He's older and he has much more perspective, and although he can still lay the beat down when he needs to, his focus is much more towards protecting his son and passing down his knowledge. As a result, this game is more about telling a story than anything else, and if you allow it to, it will suck you into a truly magical, emotional and engaging narrative that will stick with you for a long time. In the interest of spoilers, I can't say much more without taking away from the story, but believe me, it's not one that you're going to want to miss. Now, he's a father, so Kratos is now going to be joined in the game by his son Atreus. And to quell a lot of people's fears, this does not mean that he is a hindrance to Kratos and that the game is one huge escort mission. In fact, that could not be further from the truth. Atreus actively aids you in combat and traversing the environment, and as the story progresses and as he grows, the relationship between father and son also changes with it. In fact, the exploration is one of the more fun things in the game, and if you see something off into the distance, more often than not you can go there. In this way, the story and the exploration kind of go hand in hand and they follow each other along. And as you spend time with these characters, you will seek chests and upgrades and slay monsters, which will vary from normal size to insanely huge. And all of the aspects of the gameplay are engaging and fluid, but will also require you to think outside the box. You will even do some puzzles in the underground tombs and fight enemies that you'll need to figure out what a strategy to take them down. The smaller enemies can be taken down by your basic axe combos, while larger enemies will need you to take advantage of every tool that you have at your disposal. Because of this, it always has something new and fresh around every corner to keep you on your toes, and the enemies will always surprise you with their attack patterns as they constantly evolve and making them very hard to predict. The mountain-sized enemies also make their appearance a few times during the story, and since these moments are probably the most memorable of the game, I don't wish to spoil any of those either. Just be assured, the people who feared these huge battles were gone with these huge creatures. You don't have to worry, they are back, and they are as large and spectacular as ever. And speaking of the variety of enemies, other than story, the combat is probably the second most main focus of the game. The combat system reminded me of a mixture between Dark Souls and a more superhero based game like the Batman's or the Spider-Man games. You have your light and heavy attacks, parries, dodges and executions. The fight is incredibly meaty and satisfying, and it plays wonderfully into Kratos' old style, but also feels like he's using a new fresh system as well. Atreus also gets involved in the combat freely, but you can also control when and where he fires his arrows, giving combat an extra level of strategy and depth. He can do damage to enemies, but he can also incapacitate them, or he can set them up for your brutal executions when you are in position. The executions are very cinematic, and you'll be pleased to hear they are as hardcore as ever. Kratos can still rip enemies completely apart, and the first time you'll see these absolutely brutal moments, it's truly a sight to behold. There are enough of them in the game as well for each enemy that they stayed fresh and interesting for the majority of the game. They only became slightly repetitive towards the very few final hours of the game, but that's a very small gripe. You do however feel as though your aggression is justified because the enemies are completely relentless, especially on the harder difficulties, and they can be just as brutal as you. But it still doesn't feel unfairly difficult at any point, which means they have achieved a great balance. This balance is achieved by an excellent upgrade system for Kratos, Atreus and all the weapons in the game. The skill trees are very flexible and you can focus on a specific tree without feeling you are underpowered in any areas. Or you can go for a more evenly jack-of-all-trades character without spreading yourself too thin for all the situations. It's a robust system that can change the game in many ways while still keeping the core game enjoyable for whatever path you choose. It's a great system and it fleshes out the game even further than it already is. Next up is graphics, and it is beautiful. It's got astonishing looking vistas and crisp animations that really bring the world and characters to life even in combat. The lighting in particular is spectacularly detailed and the particle effects really shine, especially when using magic. Environments are always a marvel to look at through, whether you are inside a depressingly dark and damp cave or out in the open with the world stretching out for miles and miles before you. The lake in particular took my breath away throughout that entire portion of the game, and I would not only say that this game looks the best of the year so far, but probably one of the best of this entire console generation. It's that good. The only thing I would mention is that the game it has a few setting modes for you to choose from regarding frame rates, and having tried this on the PS4 Pro in performance mode, I'd probably recommend that you switch to 4K and leave it there. Both modes do suffer with a few frame rate drops, but the 4K mode is locked at 30 FPS and you will find much less juttering than the uncapped performance mode. I don't usually mind what frame rates play as, but playing on performance mode in this game, it became very noticeable when it was going from the 50s, maybe even 60, I don't know, and it was dropping to probably below 30. It was very noticeable. But overall, the game looks great for what it is. It's got spectacular visuals. Just play it on the 4K, don't play it on the performance mode. Complementing the graphics is a superb soundtrack. It sounds great for combat, voice, magic, and all the background music. They all blend together so well for whatever situation you're in. It really is a feast for the ears. Even the new voice of Kratos is believable, and it really gets across the character has changed and grown since the last time we saw him. It blends in so well with all the other characters in the game, especially with his son, who is obviously the main focus throughout this adventure. Even later on in the game, when I was exploring locations that were kind of similar to previous places, the music, it didn't repeat, it never repeated, and it was always relevant and sometimes even emotional. This type of soundtrack is why I point out good sound design is a critical part of a game's overall performance, especially with games that try to tell a story as well as deliver a good gameplay experience. I really cannot fault any aspects of the sounds in this game. They're all done so very well. Overall, every single aspect of this game blends together to create a fantastic overall package. There's a bundle of stuff to enjoy here for anybody who plays it. Your first playthrough is probably going to take between 25 to 30 hours, depending on your playstyle and exploration time, and the harder difficulties make this game replayable for at least one more time, which makes it good value for money as well. This game it's a very comfortable 9 out of 10 from me. It only just misses on the 10 out of 10 because of the slight graphical issues I ran into in the performance mode and the fact that the over-the-shoulder field of view can be a little frustrating and janky in heavy combat. But the superb story, exploration and combat system all come together so well to form one of the best games of this year. Thank you for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like, share and subscribe as I've said before. And if you wish to support me even further, you can visit my Patreon and other social sites that I will link you down below. Thanks very much and I'll see you all next time.